So our title today is A Personal Experience of the Divine. And our theme for the month is the Living Spirit. And the quote for today is, "We teach spiritual practices to address everyday life." We teach spiritual practices to address everyday life because what Ernest Holmes, who founded the Science of Mind and Spirit back in the early 20th century, said, what good is the possibility until it is used? What good is knowledge unless we make practical application of it? And he said, what the world needs is spiritual conviction followed by spiritual experience. I would rather see a student of this science prove its principle than to have him repeat all the words of wisdom that have ever been uttered. It is far easier to teach the truth than it is to practice it. Ain't that the truth? So, when we talk about a personal experience of the divine, one of the stories that comes to my mind is a story about a little boy who was 5 years old. He was taking a nap, and a fire started in his house. And he was rescued from the fire, but his mother perished in the fire. And his father was so distraught and so grief-stricken that he could not even look at his son, that he in some way blamed his son for surviving the fire. And so here is this little boy, 5 years old, and his mother is dead. His father can't look at him, and he is totally distraught. He's weeping uncontrollably. He's laying in his little bed, and he's just weeping uncontrollably, feeling so alone, when all of a sudden, at the end of his bed, there appears a woman, shimmering woman. And being a little Catholic boy, he recognizes her as the Holy Mother. And all of a sudden, he feels this warmth. He feels comfort. He feels loved. And he knows that he is not alone. And he calms down. And he goes to sleep, knowing that he's safe, knowing that there is this presence where he is. When we think of an experience of the divine, we think of those kinds of experiences. Those experiences are called numinous experiences. Numen is a Latin word meaning a holy or spiritual experience, something awe-inspiring. But really, we can have awe-experiencing moments every day. And they don't have to be of that nature. But in that moment, that was just what that child needed, and he was open and available for Spirit to send him a message of comfort and love. And so it's about opening, being available to realizations of the presence that is here always. In this month's Science of Mind magazine, there is a story about a rapper. Actually, he was a young man raised in LA from parents who came from India. His name is Nimo Patel, or Nemo Patel. I'm not sure if it's Nimo or Nemo, N-I-M-O. Nemo Patel. So Nemo Patel is a young man who was raised there and was an excellent student, but he loved music and he loved to rap. In fact, he did a rap in his graduation. He did a graduate and rap. And then he was accepted at the Wharton School of Business, and graduated from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania and started a job on Wall Street. But he also kept up with the music, and he had a bunch of friends that got together and they started playing music, and boom, they had a contract with Sony Records, and then he was on MTV, and then they started doing a comic strip, and then he got they said, do this comic strip in India. These venture capitalists came to him and said, do this in India. That this will be a great thing. So he had his own production company. They were producing this music. They were producing these comic strips. And he had the cars, the house, all of the stuff that he had held in his mind as pictures of success. Oh yeah, this is what success looks like. He actually had a picture of the mansion by the sea with the garage with all the cars in it, with the Porsche and the Ferrari and the who knows what else in there. And he had all of these things that he thought were supposed to make him happy, and he was suffering. He was not feeling fulfillment. He was not feeling contentment. So, what did he do? Well, he did 3 things. He simplified, he experimented, and he served. So he sold or gave away everything. And he headed up to the Himalayas, meditated for a month, 8 to 12 hours a day. And when he came back, he said, my role now is eliminating suffering. First of all, my own. Because he said, I can't serve others. I can't eliminate anybody else's suffering if I don't come from a pure heart. And so I have to eliminate my own suffering first. And so he began to serve. He moved into an ashram, the ashram of Gandhi, the Gandhi ashram. And he started working with kids. And he took a bunch of kids, 8 to 11 years old, from the slums of India. And from 5 different slums, he had these kids from 8 to 11, and he started doing a production with them. He created a musical. And they had this musical, and they would do this musical, and they started doing it all over in India, and then they ended up in Great Britain, and then they ended up coming to the United States. And so for 2 years, he was with these kids, 5 hours a day, doing this thing. And it was really successful, and it was really wonderful. And they said, okay, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And he said, not that. I've done that, and that was a good thing to do, and now I need to do nothing. I need to just be. And so he went back to the ashram, and he chopped vegetables, and he cleaned the ashram. But he did, when they asked him, what are you doing? He said, nothing. Doing nothing. Because he was practicing being, not doing. And like we say, we're human beings, not human doings. So that's what he did. And then he began to rediscover his music. He began to start writing songs again. And he founded a music company called Empty Hands Music. Because he said, we all come into this world empty-handed, and we will all leave this world empty-handed. So what do we do in between? What are we doing in between? And so he writes this music, he creates CDs and digital downloads and all of that stuff, and they're all free. They're all free. Because he says, this is all about universal truth. He said, how could I charge for a universal truth? He says, how could I charge for that? He said, he did a TED Talk, and you can look at this online if you do Nemo Patel plus TED Talk. It's called From Solving to Serving to Surrender. From solving to serving to surrender. And if you go to the Sierra Center website, there is also a link to a song called Gratitude. Or excuse me, Grateful. I'm sorry, it's called Grateful, a Love Song to the World. Grateful, a Love Song to the World. And that's him with Daniel Nahmod, who was the author of the song that Gracie was just singing, and a song we all sang together. So he is doing, this is his life's work now. He lives very simply, and he has this music company, and he's producing this music, and he's still serving the children. All the money that does come via donations for the music that he makes goes to the children. And he had the experience of not having the big thing. You know, when we think of a personal experience of God, we think of the numinous experience. We think of the burning bush. We think of the voice that says, "This is God, and you are chosen." Right? We're waiting for the big voice. But it's not a big voice. It's a small, still voice. It's a voice that each of us can tune into if we are still and if we are silent. This is why we have these spiritual practices that we teach, in order for each of us to connect with and have that experience of God that comes in the small things. So we have practices like meditation, and we don't teach a specific form of meditation. We don't say, you have to sit in the lotus position, you have to light a candle, you have to hold your hands this way, we don't do that. We say, here's one way you could do it. You could do it that way, or you could do it this way, or you could do a walking meditation, or you could do a swimming meditation. There's any kind of way that you can tune into the silence. You can lose your thoughts and become silent. So we teach all different kinds. One of the things we do in this class that I'm teaching in January is we have a book called The Joy of Meditation, and every week there's a different form of meditation that you're invited to try out. This is the experiment part, where you experiment with what works for you. When he was doing experiments like not eating in a restaurant for a year. I would die of starvation, but anyway. But I could experiment with that. And, giving up sweets and, experimenting with all these different things to see how it impacts his spiritual life. And to see what serves him and nurtures him in his spirit, in his soul. So we also teach a form of prayer that's different from other forms of prayer. We do not teach a beseeching prayer. We do not say, oh God, please give me, blah, blah, blah. We're not thinking God is outside of us. What we're doing is praying from a place of realizing the power and the presence of the One. And so what we do is we start out with thinking about how awesome life is, how beautiful, how creative, how interconnected everything is. If the earth wasn't just at this particular angle, we wouldn't have the seasons, and we wouldn't have the crops, and we wouldn't have this earth that we live on. There's so many miraculous things that are happening all the time. We think about that, and then we realize, oh my goodness, I'm one of the miracles. Look at this body. It does all these things that I don't even have to think about. It transforms matter into energy every day, every time I eat something. It's miraculous. It does all of these amazing things. And so I'm one with this amazing thing. And then I say, and wouldn't it be great if I had this experience? So we declare something that we would like to experience. And whatever it is, we would like to not only have it for ourselves, but for everyone. We would like whatever it is to be present everywhere, in everyone. And so we're claiming that quality of peace of mind, and we're claiming that quality of joy, and that quality of love, that quality of harmony. We're claiming those qualities that just inspire and enliven and enrich us. And then we're grateful because we generated the feeling already, and it's the feeling that brings something into manifestation. The universe responds to the feeling. I was under the weather on Friday due to a medical procedure I don't need to go into. But anyway, I was watching television, and of course there's like a marathon of Star Trek movies because they're getting us all primed for the new Star Trek movie. So I see the first Star Trek movie, and there is Yoda teaching Luke. Star Wars, not Star Trek. Star Wars. Sorry. Cancel. Star Wars, yes, Star Wars. I guess I just hate the name Star Wars because it's like, oh, can we not do that anymore? But anyway, even before, Luke starts to realize he's got something going. Even when he's flying his plane into the Death Star. Remember that? He flies his plane into the Death Star, and he's got the computer there, and the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi says, trust the Force. Let the Force guide you. So he takes the computer out of the way and just lets the Force guide him to the right place to do what he needs to do to shoot the Death Star, make it unusable. And so he realizes that he's got this power. And then, he goes to under the tutelage of Yoda, who tells him all kinds of spiritual stuff. This is a very spiritual movie. He says, the Force is an energy field all around us that we can use by feeling into it. That's what Obi-Wan Kenobi says. Feel into the Force. That's what creates. The feeling is what resonates in the energy field. And he says, fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. And he also says, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. And I thought it was, Yoda asks Luke to lift his ship out of the swamp. And he's been lifting rocks, and he even lifted up R2-D2 when he was standing on his head. He's lifting up all these things. But he says, okay, lift up the ship out of the swamp. And he said, well, I can't do that. He said, well, I think you can. And so he says, well, I'll try. And Yoda says, do or not do, don't try. No such thing as try. Do or not do. No such thing as try. So he tries to do it, but he doesn't believe that he can do it because it's too big. So because he doesn't believe, it doesn't happen. And Yoda tells him, your belief is what you have to make it happen. And of course, Yoda lifts it right up and over on the dry land. Because Yoda has the realization that this force, this power is all around, and that it can be used if we believe. If we believe that it can. We say there's no big or small in the God that made us all. So we might think, well, I could pray for a parking space, but, praying for, this other, healing this relationship, that's a whole other thing. That's too big. Well, if we think it's too big, it is. But if we say, there is a power in the universe that I can use for good, and I am willing to believe that I can be guided to the resources and the community or the teaching or whatever it is that I need to know in order to make this happen. And sure enough, when we set that divine intention with a pure heart, we manifest. Things show up. Ever had like these synchronicities? You think about a friend and they call. I was thinking about my old boyfriend, my first boyfriend at the University of California. And I was thinking about him. I was saying, gosh, I wonder how he is. Boom, the next week he calls me. Yeah. So it was like, howdy. Thank you. And so many times when we think of something we'd like to do, all of a sudden something shows up that gives us the information that we need. Bless you. So we know that there is something out there. There's this universal consciousness. We call it consciousness. You call it the force, whatever you call it. There's this thing that's around us and in us, and we communicate with it, and it communicates with us if we let it. If we let it. So the other practices we do, besides meditation and prayer, we do service. Because in serving others, we are served. Nemo Patel had that experience where he was serving these children in the slums, and one day he got a call, and this little boy's house had been torn down suddenly, without warning. They had come and torn down his house. And so he grabbed a bag of groceries and rushed over there, and they greeted him smiling and said, "Would you like a cup of tea?" And he was like, "Your house has been torn down, and you have nothing, and yet you are smiling and offering me a cup of tea." He said, these small things, it wasn't the big things, it was these small things that made him feel that presence, that made him realize the divine order. He showed a picture in his TED Talk of shoes lined up in a straight line, and he said, for me, that is divine order. That is a blessing, seeing these shoes lined up outside the door, for all the kids that were participating in the activities. And just seeing that, made his heart sing. Just seeing these small things. It wasn't in the big things, it was in the small things. And we have those experiences every day. Listening to the rain, fire in the fireplace, all of these blessings that we have, all of these experiences as we are present in the moment. That's the other thing. Yoda said you have to be present, because he was always thinking about how I'm going to defeat, Darth Vader, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, no, be here now. This is where God is happening in this moment if we are present to it. So this is other practices we do to try to be present, in addition to meditation and prayer and study. We do service and study is like reinforcing, finding out what serves us, finding out practices that work for us, finding things that inspire us, stories, wisdom teachings that enable us to take hold of our lives in a greater way, to expand our lives in a greater way. So I just invite you in this moment to just close your eyes, if you would, and just think of an experience of something. You know, every experience we have is a personal experience. So I want you to just think about something beautiful in your own life. Something maybe that inspired you to a moment of awe or wonder. Maybe it was Yosemite, and maybe it was a butterfly, and maybe it was a hummingbird, or falling snow, or fall colors, the dogwoods in spring, a baby smile, your lover's face. And just feel into that for a moment. Does it feel heart-opening? Does it feel expansive? Does it open to a possibility that is greater? So gently come back to the room. Feel that feeling, that expansiveness, that wholeness, that holiness, that beauty, whatever it is. And I'm going to do a small reading from the book that we're doing this month, The Global Heart Awakens. If we are to build a world of the future, one that truly opens the heart, we must pay attention to creating beauty as much as functionality, to courting the senses as well as the mind, to healthy pleasures as an antidote to pain and suffering. True beauty reminds us that we are close to the sacred and invites the heart to love. For beauty's sake, we will treasure and care for our world. For beauty's sake, we will treasure and care for our world. So I just invite you to look for the presence of the divine in yourself and in everything around you, every moment. And our affirmation for today is, I open to divine experiences every day. 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 And so it is.